What's up, Barefoot Nation? This week, we are going outside. Of course, it's June. It's gorgeous. Regardless, this week, we are doing a June garden tour. Let's go! So, before we get into it too much, my good friend had suggested that I mow my lawn beforehand. Well, I forgot, so I'm filming this beforehand so that y'all are like, holy crap, your lawn is tall. Just kidding. Alright guys, let's get into it. So I just can't help but start in this corner of the garden, which is kind of the main area off the patio and under the cabana that to say I'm speechless actually isn't that far off. Well, I guess I'm talking about it now. But anyways, guys, I just can't get over how beautiful all the different colors and flowers are, and everything is doing really well. Something that I did this year is I dug out a newly planted rhododendron where you see this Autolucan laurel. And the reason that I did that is the rhododendron needs shade, and last year it got that from an Enset banana. And even though I have different types of elephantiers like this alocasia and different, and then a fruiting banana, a Cavendish, right here, it was still too much sun for the rhododendron. So I dug it out, and I actually need to repot it or get it planted somewhere else in a shadier spot. I might take it to my parents' house just because they have kind of that woodland vibe. I didn't plant these daylilies here, but they are absolutely gorgeous. I love the double orange flowers and how it's still kind of that wild Hemerocallis fulva type variety. And they do run like a Hemerocallis fulva as well. So wonderful plant there. This is a Hedychium coronarium, and this plant has been planted here for 2 years. Or no, this is going to be its third summer. And it's just, it was actually sold to me as Hedychium Flaming Torch, which is an old... So it was actually sold to me as Hedychium Flaming Torch. I bought it off of eBay, and it turns out that it was a Hedychium coronarium, which is a white flowering butterfly ginger, which is, at least should be fragrant. Now, the thing is the Hedychium coronariums, while they're hardy, they don't generally flower. I'm actually okay with that because it has such a beautiful foliage that it's not a bad thing. This Colocasia aloha came back from last year. I had a pretty hefty mulch pile on it, even though I didn't really probably need it because the winter was so mild. Actually, the mildest winter that I remember. As did this Hedychium coronarium, which is not against the foundation like the other one. So these are awesome, tough plants. And they do look pretty similar. So I've got a camellia, zone 6 rated camellia, which is starting to grow very nicely. It's put on maybe 6 inches of growth this year. It was winter planted and looked pretty rough for a while, so I'm happy with that. I'm really kind of at a loss for words, guys, with how stunning this calla lily is. It has been here for 2 years, and the top of these flowers, guys, and the top of the flowers here is no less than 4 feet tall. Calla lilies do really well here in Western New York because calla lilies that are left in the ground and planted properly do really well here in Western New York because we have some warm days, we have cool nights, and it's pretty rare that it gets above like 90. It happens, but not too often. It's not like it's consistently 90 for a long period of time. So these guys absolutely love being in full sun here in Buffalo, which is just, it speaks for itself. Like, I've also never seen so many flowers on this plant either. I probably should have cut these spent ones off, but, I really don't do anything to this plant except for mulching it in the winter. And even that, it's in a pretty good microclimate. It probably doesn't need the mulch, but I do it anyway because it's easy and it keeps this, which is, again, just a wonderful, wonderful plant. As I had mentioned, I planted a Cavendish banana. As bananas do, it kind of sat there for a little while. It kind of appears to have rooted in. It is starting to grow. This leaf is relatively fresh, as is this. It doesn't have the red markings, unfortunately, but, you know, not a huge deal. You can see that the Brigantes orchid is still flowering beautifully. It's starting to form its seed pods, which again, it's starting to form its seed pods, which I should probably just take them off because they don't get pollinated, I don't think. But this guy was not blooming in my Blatilla video. This is Blatilla Candles in the Wind. And what a beautiful plant. It has, you can see, a purple back, or the buds, I suppose, are purple. And then they have a beautiful white center, and then beautiful white petals, kind of almost blushed with lavender. And then this really nice yellow, I guess you'd call that a throat. While it's not vigorous like they said at Plant Delights, it has only been in the ground for 2 years, but I gave it a lot of space because it was supposed to be a vigorous plant. But nonetheless, it's an absolutely gorgeous orchid, and it's definitely quite happy. This is another calla lily that has really just woken up from dormancy a couple weeks ago. I believe that it's called Calla Flame, and I actually, when I planted this heliconia, which is very tropical and not perennial, unless you're in Miami, or I'm not sure their northernmost boundary for zone pushers, but when I planted the heliconia, this guy wasn't up yet, or it was barely emerging. So it's just amazing how fast they grow once they do come up. Of course, the agapanthus look really good. They seem to be blooming early this year, which, or at least they're budded early, but you know, I do think that they're gonna bloom slightly earlier than they do normally, and I'm not sure if that's environmental, kind of the early spring, or if that is because as they mature, they're gonna bloom earlier in full sun, or if it's temperature driven. I really don't know. But these Aggies will be absolutely gorgeous once they pop open their blue flowers. I'm really looking forward to seeing the blue salvia with the blue agapanthus, and then all the other plants still rocking and rolling, doing their thing. I should note as well that this is a cold hardy agave. This is Agave havardiana, and you can see that in the winter time, and there's an ant, in the wintertime, it kind of browns off and goes papery. But as long as that central spear is okay, kind of like a palm, they will be okay. This is apparently a suckering clone, which Havardiana doesn't seem to pup too readily. But this is a really nice plant, and I've given it 0 protection for the duration that it was in the ground. Although in the summertime, this bindweed is always trying to climb over it, so it's always kind of a careful thing to extract the bindweed off of the agave, because as you can see, it's quite sharp. One of the things I do with the agave is, just because I am a little klutzy, is I use nail clippers to cut off the very tip of that spine, and that's kind of the most lethal part. You can see, maybe, you can see that it makes, that little difference definitely makes a difference. Another interesting thing here is this, one of my favorite ground covers, this Veronica peduncularis Georgia Blue, is sending up a couple sporadic flowers. Not sure why, but the little pop of blue is always welcome. Swinging out this way, the iris area is still looking really good. The Japanese irises are finishing up, and now the Crocosmia is coming into bloom. This is one of my favorite irises called Harlequinesque, and I will insert a picture of what it looked like in bloom right here. Of course, my volunteer plants here, this, I believe it's called a smartweed. is doing what weeds do, but it's a purposeful weed. But yeah, it's pretty hard to believe that basically this whole space is almost just bare in the wintertime, except for the broadleaf evergreens, the bamboo. So yeah, it's just looking absolutely spectacular. And I love the foliage of the irises too. Absolutely wonderful. One thing that I do have to get done is all of these grass seed heads, although they do look pretty ornamental, I do want to get rid of those because grass is my biggest weed in the garden, and that says a lot. This is another amazing meadow-like vignette that I just am absolutely awestruck by every single day. I mean, this garden really is maturing beautifully. Look carefully in the field of clover in there, and whatever type of grass this is. Ooh, that's ribbon grass. That might need some Roundup. There is my hardy cactus, are doing pretty well. I can see new growth on the one over here, which again, you just can't even see. But you'll have to take, yeah, you can see the edge of the pad right there. But there are hardy cactus in there that look really cool in the wintertime. Those are western prickly pears, so Opuntia tortaspina. So right there you can, with the orange flower is an Asclepias tuberosa, so that is the drought-tolerant butterfly milkweed. So that's the drought-tolerant milkweed that is good for smaller gardens. It's not going to take over like the Asclepias syriaca or some of the other running varieties will. And speaking of another good variety of milkweed, this is Asclepias incarnata, and again, it's like just the like pastels of like the pink with the kind of lavendery purple of the Verbena bonariensis, which is every bit of 5 feet tall. I mean, I think these poplar seedlings are shading them, or volunteer poplars are shading them, so that's probably why they're so tall, but just amazing. The yellow flowers are that. The yellow flowers belong to different types of ground cover sedum. So the blue spruce or the Angelina, whatever it is out there, the clovers are kind of eating the base, so I can't really see who the flowers belong to. But regardless, it's absolutely incredible. And then there's this yellow thing. I have no idea what this is. I didn't plant it, but it's absolutely beautiful. And yeah. You can also see that the bright edge yucca is doing really well. Doesn't seem to mind being almost smothered by other plants. So Roy's repeater seems to be done flowering, but the cool thing is I actually have seed pods forming, which it didn't last year. So I'm going to be very curious to see if the seed is good. I'm not just going to willy-nilly scatter those seeds. I'm actually probably going to harvest them and label the package, because seeds off of this plant would be really, really interesting. Here's kind of a pathway out. I don't know about y'all, but we had some crazy wind, sustained gusts of wind. The bamboo was basically just on its side the whole day. And so the hose is out because one of the most important things to plants is water. So when it's real windy like that, you're gonna wanna water, especially if your plants are telling you they need it. And this bamboo, my prized yellow groove, was wilting, not like in the part that's in the shade, but specifically the part that's in the sun was wilting and looked pretty rough. The other amazing thing about bamboo, even these really tall ones, is when they wilt, I mean, they respond within minutes to getting water. It's absolutely incredible to witness. The jungle is looking, well, jungly. Again, it's just another area that I planted it kind of dense because I want it to be a forest someday. I want to have this be kind of a wildlife corridor. One of the things that we need to consider for nature is, you know, national parks are great, big pieces of land are great, but there's all of these, you know, areas in between, you know, a national park or a even not even a national park, just like a wooded area, there are these big areas of just lawn in between those, and these sorts of spaces are absolutely perfect for wildlife to move through and utilize. And there's a ton of native plants that I've planted, like this bottle brush buckeye is a great example. It looks kind of like it's wilted. I've definitely watered it a couple days ago and after the windstorm as well. So, and by the way guys, when I say I water, the way that I like to water personally is I flood irrigate. So I wait until plants are dry or telling me that they need water, and then I will just absolutely soak the area, have it be totally pooled up with water. And then I let them dry out again. And that to me is, and to me that's kind of, even though that seems like, you know, a big usage of water, I think in the long run, the plants are healthier and happier for it. This sumac tree I grew from a little seedling. I actually dug that out of someone's yard because, of course, when it's, you know, this tall, people think it's a weed. But IDing your plants, knowing your plants, what they look like as a seedling is really important. You can get some great plants that way. Another note about the wildlife corridors is this is a lot of native plants, but not everything in this back area is native. This is a Miscanthus giganteus, and Miscanthus is wonderful to use as a biofuel and just a really cool, interesting grass to have that's gonna grow 12 or 13 feet tall in one season. And I think it complements the bamboo really nicely. And of course, these are Asian bamboos, so it's not native. But again, I know controlling your bamboo is essential if you have the running types like I do. You don't have to be afraid of them. You just have to know how to control them. And when you do, gosh, man, I mean, just look at how incredible this plant is. And the function also is this is a pawpaw tree and it needs shade. So last year it did not look this good, even when it first leafed out, because it was in all day sun, and that's tough on pawpaws. So this year you can see that the color of the leaves are, first of all, they're just bigger. I mean, this tree's been here for 2 years, and I have not gotten fruit, which is fine because the tree wasn't healthy. If it did make fruit, especially such a big fruit such as a pawpaw, I wouldn't actually want that to happen because then it'll put in too much energy to the fruit and not establish. But yeah, so this is 2 years old, or it's been in the ground for 2 years, that is. This is the first year that it looks really good. And one of the things that I've been doing, besides just letting the vegetation just take over, is I planted at the base, I don't know how much this is doing for this tree, but I planted a Baptisia australis, which is a nitrogen fixing plant. So the Baptisia will actually self-fertilize when you cut it down in the fall. All of its growth will put nitrogen back into the soil. And of course, I'm not removing the clover out of this area because clover is another fantastic nitrogen fixer, whether it's in your lawn or in your garden. I like the white clover better because it's a lower growing plant. It behaves much, much better. This plant that you see here is a juncus. This is a type of rush, and it is setting seed, which is awesome. But it's in the lawn, so I think what I have to do is cut this back. These are evergreen, so it looked phenomenal throughout the winter, but I think what I'm gonna do is try and strategically cut it back so that it's not overhanging into the lawn, because when I mow, these are kind of like yuccas to where they're sharp. They're not like lethal, but you know, they're definitely not fun to run into. But I keep getting distracted by how amazing this looks in here. Basically, these are winterberry hollies right here. So these two, and then this plant that's starting to get eaten by solidago, or what the hell is it called in English? Goldenrods. Goldenrods don't cause hay fever. That is ragweed, which is a much different looking plant. But yeah, so this is getting smothered by goldenrods, this third female holly, which is fine because again, it's a wild area. That's what it's supposed to do. So there's, like I said, the buckeye, which is these native deciduous hollies, the winterberry. Of course, I mentioned the sumac, this is not poison sumac, this is staghorn sumac. My neighbor has a beautiful trumpet creeper, or Campsis radicans. I mean, there's really too many different plants to cover in here, but there's a button bush in there because it's pretty wet back in that area. There's different types of native shrub form dogwoods, which the botanists are playing around, and they moved it out of Cornus and into some other genus that I'm not going to recognize because I think it's bullshit. Like, they're just gonna move it back in a couple of years. It's like botanists need to stop playing around. This is the shrub dogwoods are great native plants for birds if you live in the eastern United States. A lot of people plant Arctic fire out west too. That someday when I build my pond here, this is gonna be part of the wetland filter, or I wanna have like a natural wooded area to the wetland filter, which is gonna someday be somewhere starting in here. If you don't know what a wetland filter is, I'll leave a link in the description. And it's basically like if you want to have a crystal clear, low maintenance pond, that's the best way to do it, especially for larger features. And there's a ton of information out on that. It has an evergreen magnolia. This is a Bracken's Brown Beauty that I bought from Lowe's back in March, believe it or not. And they're wonderful plants. The problem is with hardware stores is this tree had absolutely no root system. So it was dug in a field. Okay, it had like 2 roots. Slight exaggeration. But so getting it, I see a Japanese beetle on that flower, do you guys? So getting this tree to establish, and you know, this area is really wet in the spring. So getting this tree to establish, I know it's kind of hard to tell because the dogwood's eating it, but that's kind of part of what I'm getting at, is shade is going to be really helpful to a tree that needs help establishing. And one of the things that I don't like to do too often is I don't like to stake trees. But anyway, this tree again has dropped a lot of its leaves, which is actually good, because if this tree had kept all of its canopy down to right there where you see the tag, that would not be good for it, because there's not enough roots to support all that leaf mass if that were the case. This is also planted in a former compost pile where the magnolia is, and that compost pile, I love composting, but it wasn't done right, so it attracted rats, so I had to get rid of the compost bin. All right, guys, so finishing up back here by the water feature. Again, just absolutely amazed at how just lush and verdant and beautiful everything is. So I cracked the code on how not to kill lobelia, the annuals, but the trouble is I don't know exactly why they're thriving here, but they are. So that's fantastic regardless. Of course, the bananas are doing really well. I'm probably gonna fertilize these with some fish emulsion sooner than later. So I'm absolutely elated to see that this carnivorous plant here is doing really well. And not just this one, but also these 2 little guys right here. It's just, they're absolutely beautiful, and I love how they kind of fit in with that's actually flowering the herb, oregano. So the oregano is flowering beautifully. You can't use it once it's flowering. I guess it's more bitter. Kind of hard to capture on camera, but this vignette here, when you're sitting on the patio, this vignette here with the bananas, the water feature, the sarracenia, and the flowering oregano, how it's all just like meadowy. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But so anyways, guys, the trick to the sarracenia here, well, you're gonna have to watch that video. Just kidding. But seriously, go check it out. I'll link it in the description. So this area, I dug out all of the native soil and I mixed some peat moss and sand. And the sand, if that helps any, it was underneath. I was rebuilding a water feature for a customer, and the previous builder had used like a foot of sand underneath, which is just totally unnecessary for bedding. So you know, I removed a bunch of that just because that's what you're supposed to do, and I used some of it here mixed in with the peat moss. This is actually from here to here. This is an entire bale of peat moss, and the sand is mixed in. The aqua basin that you see here goes down 18 inches into the ground. So between the gravel patio and the aqua feature, there you go. So between the gravel patio and the water feature, there's this perfect little band that if I did something like a carny garden, the peat moss and sand is contained. It's not gonna just dissipate into the soil, or it shouldn't anyway. Some of my containers are doing absolutely, well, really they're all doing amazing. But I had to turn the camera on today because this is one of my favorite subtropical, warm temperate, whatever flowers. This is a Mexican shell flower, or Tigridia pavonia. And they're kind of like daylilies in that they only last, these flowers only last for one day, but there are several flowers, you know, in the pipe ready to fire off as soon as this guy's done. This is an Alocasia Regal Shields, and it's doing okay. So another cool thing here is, it's hard to see, is this pussy willow. This is actually a volunteer plant, so I didn't plant it. It's currently it's about 6 feet tall, and it's definitely grown a solid 2 feet this year. So just absolutely incredible plant. Now I am turning this, I'm going to kind of prune this like a Japanese tree. So I want it to have kind of a crazy contorted appearance. And so I'm also clearing off all of the little shoots that would also otherwise be developing at the base. And that is something that I have to do regularly to kind of manipulate this tree, this multi-stem tree, into a single stem. Back there you can see my Colocasia polar green, or pink china, which otherwise known as a rebranded virus-free pink china. But it's funny because some of the plants of polar green do appear to have remnant virus, but the ones that I have here, all three of mine, I made sure to get clean virus-free plants. Tissue culture is kind of variable like that. And then of course this heliconia here is I just called this a heliconia, guys. I think I need to so this canna lily here does kind of resemble, and not really. It's a beautiful, unique canna called Canna glauca panache, and I absolutely love the plant. This is actually my insurance plant. So last year I had it in here, and it didn't make it through the winter, even though it was super mild. Could be the soil moisture. Heavy clay, even though it doesn't look like it, and it's massively improved. Even though cannas can be grown as aquatic plants, the plant that I left in the ground here and mulched over the winter didn't make it because it probably had its bulb rot. These are super, it's the Proven Winners petunia called, I think they are super petunias, it's just not the Vista. But it's not the petunias that go nuts, even though they are totally going nuts. I love it. This is Hoopla Orchid, and it's doing very well, as you can see, to the point where I had a new plant to me. This is a new plant to me, at least. It's called James Britannia or Britannica or something. So the petunias are totally swallowing that. Samachia here, which this is actually a hardy plant. It's hardy to zone 7. And the reason I know that is because although it's very hard to see in the ginger jungle, these you can see their cute little yellow flowers back in the ginger. And this is literally right off my patio. So that's kind of one of my little tiny bands of Zone 7 microclimate. And the ginger also gets a little light layer of mulch in the winter, but that probably wouldn't be enough to overwinter one of those. I don't think. I don't know. Super Blue Liriope from plugs is really taken off nicely. I guess when they're grown in full sun, even Liriope from plugs can grow pretty quickly. So this is my little clumping bamboo area. I planted clumping bamboo here because it's really close to a property line and a patio, and it just, rhizome pruning in this area would not make sense. So clumping bamboos are just better for areas like that if it's the right spot for the plant. So anyway, this is a Fargesia robusta, which I've been having my eye on these plants for years and years, and it's funny, when my papa was alive, I would always kind of lament like I wanted to grow it, and he's like, just wait. So far so good. The thing that I'm gonna say is I don't expect them to be evergreen in this climate in Zone 6, but I hopefully expect that their roots will survive, or their stems as well, and so they'll probably flush back out from stem growth and hopefully be tall enough to, you know, do what bamboos do. This is basically what has evolved into my succulent garden. So this is a Zone 7 prickly pear, spineless prickly pear. Oxymorons. I love oxymorons. So anyway, and so that's gonna grow hopefully somewhat tall, at least taller than this agave here. This is another one of those agave havardianas, and when I planted it, there were several little runners and rhizomes circling the container. So I'm kind of hoping that the agave will spread and pop up through the sedum. This is a giant lily turf that's supposed to be hardy to Zone 5. I don't remember its name, but yeah. And then, believe it or not, these snapdragons are from last year. So they looked, you know, pretty deciduous. And yeah, so super happy to have the snaps from last year come back, and it's just a beautiful variety of snapdragon. This Angelina sedum that you see here is looking really awesome. I'm trying to kind of maintain it with a modern edge, so I'm literally using hedge shears and cutting them, and you know, it's responding. There's definitely a time of year that it responds best to that. I mean, the sable's planted here, and it's probably going to be hardy, but man, it's going to take a decade or more for it to grow into what we all want to see out of a sable palm. And lastly, but certainly not least, this little pocket garden here is absolutely a fantastic place to finish off. If you guys are this far, do me a favor. If you guys are this far into the video, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and also tap the bell. This little pocket garden here is just bursting with life, and it starts doing that in March. There's some mini daffodils that are growing in this bed. You can see here in this microclimate there is a Blatilla ocracea, which you can learn more about those in my other video specifically about hardy orchids. And there's also some more Super Blue Liriope in the back, and then another, you can actually see this plant here. This is a Sable Minor McCurtain, which hasn't done a ton this year. And amazingly, this is I've always had difficulty overwintering Bikini Teeny, but this plant with no protection made it. It was, again, a very, very mild winter, but I don't think I'm going to protect it, just because it's so close to the lily turf, but I don't know. We'll see. And then, to address the elephant in the room, look at these clovers. Just kidding. So this is a perennial colocasia, or a colocasia that came back from last year. I did mulch it pretty lightly, so maybe like 6 inches of winter mulch. I used pine bark. It's been talking for a while. Pine bark mulch is not the best for overwintering plants for zone pushing. The bulk brown hardwood or Pennsylvania gold, whatever you want to call it, that's the best mulch to use for overwintering tropicals. But regardless, this elephant ear has made it through, and it's almost July here, so this plant definitely has the potential to grow really quite large. So I will be very much so looking forward to what this plant does. I forgot to mention too, guys, this is a sedum. This was a sedum tile that you can buy these flats of sedum with different cuttings that they plant in them, and they kind of grow together. And so that's what this is, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and I thought it was noteworthy. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've gotten this far, be sure to drop it a big old thumbs up, just like that. And the amazing thing about gardening, especially in colder zones, is that the garden has already changed. Like crocosmia is now starting to flower, or is in flower, and it's just amazing. So drop a comment down below. I'm curious to see what's going on in your gardens. I love hearing from you guys. So drop a comment. Yeah. And if you want to see more content just like this, wow. Be sure to smash the subscribe button and tap the bell. It really does help out the channel. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.